300 miles off the coast of Virginia, an autonomous underwater vehicle descends through darkness that has hidden a secret for 106 years. At 4,000 feet, the sonar paint begins to resolve into something massive. Then, the cameras find it. A hull section, nearly 550 feet long, broken in half and resting on the abyssal plain. The largest ship to ever vanish without a trace in United States naval history has finally been found. And what the scans reveal is not a mystery. It is a cover-up. The ghost ship finally found. The announcement came 3 weeks ago, though the discovery itself happened in late 2024. A joint expedition between the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and private deep-sea research firm Ocean Infinity had been conducting surveys of potential World War I wreck sites along the eastern seaboard. They were not specifically looking for the USS Cyclops. They were mapping the seafloor for unrelated research when their autonomous underwater vehicle detected an anomaly. The sonar signature was enormous. 542 feet of steel lay in two distinct sections, roughly 800 feet apart. The size alone narrowed the possibilities dramatically. Very few ships of that length disappeared in this region. Only one matched the dimensions exactly. Ocean Infinity deployed their remotely operated vehicle to investigate. The depth was manageable at just over 4,000 feet, well within the capabilities of modern equipment. When the cameras reached the wreck and the floodlights illuminated the steel, there was no mistaking what they had found. The bow section lay on its port side, heavily damaged but still recognizable. The bridge structure had collapsed. The forward cargo holds gaped open, their hatch covers missing entirely. The stern section rested 800 feet away, partially buried in sediment. Between the two sections stretched a debris field containing coal, structural steel, machinery, and the personal effects of 309 people who had been aboard when the ship went down. No nameplate was visible. Time and corrosion had erased surface markings, but the configuration was unmistakable. This was a Proteus-class collier. Of the 4 ships built to that design, 3 had vanished without a trace. The USS Cyclops was the first and most famous. Ocean Infinity spent 2 weeks documenting the site before making the discovery public. They deployed multiple drones to photograph every visible surface. They used photogrammetry to create a complete 3-dimensional model of both sections. They collected sediment samples, measured hull plating thickness, and cataloged the debris field. When Ocean Infinity released the findings, the maritime archaeology community reacted with stunned silence. This was not because the ship had been found, but because of what the wreck revealed about how she died. For 106 years, the disappearance of the USS Cyclops has been called the greatest unsolved mystery in naval history. Entire books have been written about the Bermuda Triangle, with Cyclops held up as the prime example of supernatural forces at work. The official Navy position has always been that the ship was lost to unknown causes, possibly enemy action or a catastrophic storm. But the wreck tells a completely different story, a story the United States Navy has known all along. The largest ship to vanish without a trace. The USS Cyclops was commissioned in 1910 as part of a new class of coal-carrying vessels designed to keep the fleet operational across vast distances. She was 542 feet long, displacing 19,600 tons fully loaded, and could carry nearly 11,000 tons of coal in her cavernous holds. She was not a warship, she was a collier, a floating coal depot that could refuel destroyers, cruisers, and battleships wherever the Navy needed them. In an era when steam power ruled the seas and bunker fuel did not yet exist, colliers were the logistical backbone of naval operations. Without them, the fleet could not move. The Proteus class represented the cutting edge of collier design. 4 ships were built: USS Proteus, USS Nereus, USS Jupiter, and USS Cyclops. USS Jupiter would later be converted into USS Langley, America's first aircraft carrier, and survive until World War II. The other three would all vanish under mysterious circumstances between 1918 and 1941, taking over 600 men to the bottom with them. Cyclops was the largest of the class and the most heavily used. By 1918, she had been in service for 8 years, steaming back and forth across the Atlantic and Caribbean, hauling coal to naval stations and fleet units. The work was grinding and relentless. Her engines were run hard. Her hull was subjected to constant stress from heavy loads and rough seas. And her maintenance schedule was determined not by the condition of the ship, but by the operational demands of a navy at war. Her captain in 1918 was Lieutenant Commander George Worley, a German-born naturalized American who had served in the Navy for years. Worley was known as a harsh disciplinarian with a volatile temper. Several crew members had filed complaints about his conduct. He was rumored to drink heavily and make erratic decisions. But competent ship commanders were in short supply during the war, and Worley kept his command. On March 4, 1918, Cyclops departed Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, carrying a load of manganese ore destined for Baltimore. The ore was critical war material used in steel production. The ship also carried 299 crew members and 10 passengers, including the American Consul General to Rio. The total manifest listed 309 people aboard. It would be the single largest loss of life in a non-combat incident in United States naval history, and not one of them would ever be seen again. The final voyage into silence. The voyage north from Rio should have been routine. Cyclops had made similar runs dozens of times. The weather forecast showed no significant storms along her route. German U-boats were known to be operating in the Atlantic, but the submarine threat was considered minimal in the shipping lanes Cyclops would travel. On March 10, 1918, Cyclops made an unscheduled stop in Barbados. Captain Worley reported engine trouble and requested time to make repairs. The British authorities who controlled the port noted that the ship appeared heavily loaded, riding low in the water and listing slightly to port. Worley spent 3 days in Barbados. He sent no formal reports back to the Navy about the nature of the repairs or the condition of his ship. On March 13th, he departed for Baltimore. The distance was roughly 2,000 miles. At Cyclops' normal cruising speed of 13 knots, the journey should have taken 6 days. She should have arrived in Baltimore on March 19th. She never did. And more disturbingly, she never sent a distress call. Ships sinking at sea in 1918 typically had some warning. Fires gave crews time to send messages. Flooding from hull breaches took hours to sink a vessel of Cyclops' size. Even torpedo strikes rarely destroyed a ship instantly. Radio operators aboard doomed vessels almost always managed to transmit at least a fragmentary SOS before going down. Cyclops sent nothing. No distress call. No position report indicating trouble. No cryptic final transmission. She simply vanished somewhere between Barbados and Baltimore, taking 309 souls with her into silence. The Navy launched an immediate search. Destroyers and patrol craft swept the expected route. Aircraft flew reconnaissance missions over the projected track. Coast Guard stations from Florida to Virginia were alerted to watch for wreckage or survivors. Nothing was found. No debris field, no bodies, no lifeboats, no oil slick. The ocean had swallowed the largest ship in the Navy's auxiliary fleet and left no evidence behind. The official investigation concluded that Cyclops had probably been lost to enemy action, most likely torpedoed by a German U-boat. This theory had a significant problem. No German U-boat ever claimed credit for sinking the Cyclops. U-boat commanders were meticulous about recording their kills. A target as large and valuable as an American naval collier would have been reported immediately to Berlin. The captured German naval records were searched after the war. No mention of Cyclops appeared anywhere. The alternate theory was that a sudden, catastrophic storm had overwhelmed the ship. Weather reports from March 1918 showed no major storms along Cyclops' route during the relevant time window. But the Atlantic is unpredictable, and localized squalls could have formed without being recorded. This theory also had problems. Cyclops was a large, sturdy ship designed to handle rough seas. Her crew was experienced. Even if caught in a severe storm, the ship should have had time to send a distress call before foundering. By the end of 1918, the Navy had no explanation to offer grieving families beyond the vague assessment that Cyclops had been lost at sea due to unknown causes. The case remained officially open, but practically abandoned. The file gathered dust for decades while the ship became a legend. And then the Bermuda Triangle took over the story entirely. If you are still here, you now understand that 309 people vanished without a trace aboard the largest ship ever lost by the United States Navy. Comment below if you are following this investigation. And if you have not subscribed, please do so and turn on the bell notification so you do not miss what comes next. Your support helps us tell the stories that official histories left incomplete. Now, let us talk about why this mystery endured for over a century and what the underwater drone finally revealed. A century of theories and dead ends. The disappearance of the USS Cyclops became the cornerstone of the Bermuda Triangle mythology. Writers in the 1960s and 70s seized on the case as proof of paranormal forces operating in the Atlantic. A massive Navy ship with 300 people aboard does not simply vanish without a trace unless something extraordinary happened. The lack of wreckage, the absence of a distress call, the complete silence all pointed to forces beyond normal explanation. Books were written, documentaries were filmed. The Cyclops became Exhibit A in the case for electromagnetic anomalies, time warps, underwater alien bases, and every other theory that stretched credibility. The fact that her sister ships Nereus and Proteus also vanished without a trace in later years only reinforced the supernatural narrative. 3 ships from the same class, all disappearing in the same general region, all leaving no evidence. It seemed impossible to explain through conventional means. The German submarine theory persisted in some circles, despite the lack of supporting evidence. A few researchers argued that a U-boat could have sunk Cyclops and then been destroyed itself before reporting the kill, which would explain why German records showed nothing. That hypothesis required an extraordinary coincidence, and it ignored the fact that submarines rarely sank ships without leaving debris. Weather remained the most plausible conventional explanation. The Atlantic in March can be violent, and sudden storms could have capsized the ship before anyone could react. But Cyclops was not some small coastal freighter. She was a 542-foot naval auxiliary designed to operate in the open ocean. Storms severe enough to sink her instantly should have shown up in weather records. They did not. Structural failure theories emerged over the decades. Some naval architects suggested that Cyclops could have suffered a catastrophic hull failure, breaking in half and sinking before the crew realized what was happening. This matched the lack of distress calls and the absence of survivors. But without a wreck to examine, the theory remained pure speculation. The mystery endured because every theory had fatal flaws, and the Navy, for its part, seemed content to let the case remain unsolved. Official inquiries were perfunctory. No major effort was made to locate the wreck. The families of the lost were told their loved ones had died serving their country, and that was supposed to be enough. For 106 years, Cyclops sat on the ocean floor, holding answers that no one seemed interested in finding, until a research drone stumbled across her by accident and forced the truth into the open. The technology that changed everything. Ocean Infinity had not set out to solve the Cyclops mystery. Their 2024 expedition was focused on mapping unexplored sections of the continental slope off Virginia and the Carolinas. The autonomous underwater vehicles they deployed were state-of-the-art systems capable of surveying vast areas of seafloor in a fraction of the time older technology required. These autonomous underwater vehicles operate independently, following pre-programmed search patterns without human control. They carry multi-beam sonar arrays that create three-dimensional maps of the seafloor in stunning detail. Side-scan sonar detects objects projecting above the bottom. Sub-bottom profilers penetrate the sediment to reveal buried structures. And high-definition cameras capture visual footage when something worth investigating appears. The autonomous underwater vehicle that found Cyclops was working a grid approximately 300 miles off Cape Hatteras when its sonar detected a massive linear feature on the bottom. The initial passes showed two distinct sections of wreckage consistent with a large ship. The dimensions matched known World War I-era colliers. The location fit within the possible search area for Cyclops, though it was further offshore than most theories had predicted. Ocean Infinity retrieved the autonomous underwater vehicle and deployed a remotely operated vehicle for closer inspection. The remotely operated vehicle descended to 4,100 feet, carrying floodlights and cameras capable of capturing millimeter-scale detail. When the images reached the surface vessel, the expedition team knew immediately they had found something significant. The wreck was enormous. The bow section measured approximately 300 feet from the breakpoint to the forward edge. The stern section was slightly smaller. Both were heavily damaged but structurally intact enough to be measured and analyzed. The debris field between them contained cargo and equipment that would help identify the ship conclusively. Over 2 weeks, Ocean Infinity conducted a comprehensive photogrammetric survey. Multiple remotely operated vehicle dives captured over 500,000 images from every possible angle. Artificial intelligence algorithms processed the images into a seamless, three-dimensional model, accurate to within millimeters. For the first time since March 1918, the USS Cyclops could be examined in complete detail. And what that examination revealed was not a mystery, it was a scandal. What the three-dimensional scans revealed. The three-dimensional model of the wreck showed a ship that had suffered catastrophic structural failure. The break occurred amidships, almost exactly at the center of the vessel's length. Both sections showed evidence of violent separation, not the relatively clean fracture you might expect from a torpedo hit or a collision with another vessel. The hull plating around the break was bent outward in some places and crumpled inward in others. Metal that should have torn showed signs of fatigue failure, the kind of progressive weakening that occurs when steel is stressed beyond its limits over time. Rivet lines along the deck had separated, allowing plates to peel away from the underlying structure. The forward cargo holds were completely open. The heavy steel hatch covers that should have sealed them were missing, either torn off during the breakup or never properly secured in the first place. This was critical. Open cargo holds meant that water would flood the interior instantly if the ship lost buoyancy. With 11,000 tons of manganese ore in the holds and no hatch covers to keep water out, Cyclops would have gone down like a stone. The stern section showed similar damage. The engine room was exposed, the deck plating ripped away by forces that pulled the ship apart from the inside out. Machinery that should have been bolted to the deck had been thrown around during the breakup, ending up scattered in the debris field. Metallurgical samples were not taken during the initial survey due to legal restrictions on disturbing the wreck, but high-resolution photography allowed experts to analyze the fracture patterns remotely. The steel around the break showed characteristics consistent with brittle fracture under overload conditions. This type of failure occurs when metal is subjected to stress beyond its elastic limit, particularly in cold conditions where steel becomes less ductile. The cargo hold analysis was perhaps the most damning evidence. The three-dimensional scan allowed researchers to calculate the volume of the holds and estimate how much cargo the ship was carrying when she sank. The numbers were staggering. Cyclops was rated to carry 10,800 tons of coal. But coal is relatively light compared to ore. Manganese ore has a density nearly 3 times that of coal. If the holds were loaded to capacity with ore instead of coal, the ship would be carrying over 30,000 tons of cargo on a hull designed for less than 11,000 tons. The scans suggested that Cyclops was massively overloaded when she left Rio de Janeiro. The manganese shipment was critical war material, and the pressure to deliver it quickly would have been intense. Captain Worley either did not understand the danger or chose to ignore it. The result was a ship carrying 3 times the weight it was designed to handle, stressing every rivet, every weld, every structural member beyond its rated capacity. The missing hatch covers made the overload catastrophic. With the holds exposed and the ship riding dangerously low in the water, even moderate seas could have sent water sloshing into the cargo spaces. The free surface effect would have destabilized the ship instantly. And if the structural members were already strained to breaking point, any sudden shift in weight distribution could have snapped the keel like a twig. The evidence was overwhelming. Cyclops had not been torpedoed. She had not been struck by a rogue wave. She had not vanished into some paranormal void. She had broken in half because she was overloaded, improperly secured, and sent to sea in a condition that guaranteed her destruction. But the most disturbing revelation was not what the scans showed. It was what the Navy records had shown all along. The design flaw the Navy never wanted to discuss. The Proteus class had a problem from the day they were launched. Naval architects noted that the ships had insufficient longitudinal strength for their length. The keel and supporting structures provided little safety margin if vessels were overloaded or subjected to heavy seas. A report filed in 1911, 1 year after USS Cyclops entered service, specifically warned that the class was vulnerable to structural failure if cargo was not properly distributed. The report recommended modifications to strengthen the keel. The modifications were never implemented. Cost was too high. Operational tempo left no time for refits. In 1915, USS Jupiter suffered significant structural damage during a storm. The keel cracked but held, and temporary repairs were made. The incident was documented but treated as an isolated failure. Then, in January 1918, 2 months before Cyclops disappeared, a naval engineering officer filed a report stating that Proteus-class colliers should not carry ore shipments due to overloading risk. The report never reached the fleet. By the time it circulated through bureaucracy, Cyclops was already loading manganese in Rio de Janeiro. After Cyclops vanished, no investigation examined whether structural issues contributed. No modifications were ordered for remaining ships. In 1941, both Proteus and Nereus disappeared while carrying ore. Neither sent distress calls. Neither left wreckage. Identical circumstances to Cyclops. 3 ships from the same class, all carrying ore. All vanished. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The Navy ignored it anyway. Admitting the design flaw would expose the service to lawsuits and investigations. 600 men had been sent to sea in ships known to be unsafe. So, the official story remained unknown causes, and the flaw that killed them stayed buried in archives. Until now. The truth, written in steel. 3-dimensional scans allowed engineers to reconstruct exactly how the ship failed. The answer was brutally simple. Cyclops departed Rio de Janeiro overloaded by at least 20,000 tons. Manganese ore weighs 180 pounds per cubic foot. Coal weighs 50 pounds per cubic foot. The holds designed for 10,800 tons of coal were carrying over 30,000 tons of ore. Every structural member was bearing 3 times its rated load. The missing hatch covers meant water could flood the holds freely. Each wave added stress to a hull already flexed beyond its limits. The stop in Barbados suggested problems were already manifesting. British observers noted the dangerous list. Worley departed anyway. Sometime after leaving Barbados, the keel fractured at frame 68, the point of maximum stress. The ship broke in half. 30,000 tons of ore and flooding water dragged both sections down in minutes. 309 people had no time to react. No lifeboats launched. No distress call was sent. The breakup killed most instantly. The rest drowned in flooding compartments. The metallurgical analysis showed ordinary steel stressed to failure. Not torpedoed. Not struck by external force. Overloaded, improperly secured, and sent to sea in a condition that guaranteed destruction. The mystery was never a mystery. It was a cover-up, and it worked for 106 years. The price of institutional silence. 309 people trusted the USS Cyclops to keep them safe. They boarded believing the ship was seaworthy, the cargo was properly secured, and the voyage would be routine. None of those things were true. The ship had known structural weaknesses. Engineers had documented them. Recommendations to strengthen the hull were filed and ignored. When similar ships suffered damage, no lessons were applied to the rest of the class. The Navy chose operational tempo over safety, gambling that the ships would hold together long enough to be someone else's problem. Captain Worley either did not understand the danger of carrying ore instead of coal, or he understood and accepted the risk. His decision to depart Rio de Janeiro with a massive overload killed everyone aboard, but Worley was following orders. Someone in the logistics chain approved the manganese shipment. Someone calculated tonnage and signed off on a manifest that should have been rejected immediately. After Cyclops vanished, the Navy could have investigated whether overloading contributed to her loss. They could have restricted ore shipments on Proteus-class colliers. They could have ordered structural inspections of the remaining ships. They did none of these things. And when Proteus and Nereus vanished 23 years later under identical circumstances, the official response was the same. Unknown causes, no one to blame. The families of the 600 men lost aboard those 3 ships were told their loved ones died, serving their country. They were never told that their loved ones died because the Navy refused to fix a problem it had known about since 1911. They were never told that the ships were sent to sea, overloaded, under-maintained, and structurally compromised. The wreck of the U.S. Cyclops now sits in international waters, protected as a war grave. The remains of 309 people rest with the ship. Their families have had closure for 106 years. Now they have something else. Proof that the tragedy was preventable. Proof that the mystery was manufactured. The underwater drone that found Cyclops has answered questions that generations of historians could not solve. But it has also raised new ones. How many other ships were lost to similar design flaws and institutional negligence? How many families were told their loved ones died to enemy action or weather when the real cause was known and hidden? The ocean keeps many secrets. Sometimes it keeps them because we ask it to. The USS Cyclops waited 106 years to tell her story. The steel tells the truth the Navy tried to sink.